Welcome back to Mom and Mind. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. On this episode, I am joined by Dr. Latoya Lusa Sampson, or Dr. Toya, as she's known on social media. I love when I get to talk to OBs. I think they are really, really, really important in the role of perinatal mental health. And my heart is so happy when I hear that more and more OBs are getting adequate training and really understanding what to look out for in terms of perinatal mental health. Dr. Toya is a wife, a mother, a board certified OB, and coach, and she shows physician moms who are postpartum and beyond how to go from feeling anxiety and resentment to feeling confidence and joy. And she does that through private coaching and also as the host of Stethoscopes and Strollers podcast. In this episode, she's going to be talking about her own experience as well. What it's like to deal with perinatal mental health as a physician and as an OB, and the gaps in postpartum care that she has seen and knows about in relation to perinatal mental health, and also just how universal some of these experiences can be. It's not having a perinatal mental health condition isn't dependent on race or socioeconomic status, but we do know there are certain stressors that make it more prevalent for certain populations. And the thing I love again about this episode is when an OB comes to share their personal experience, it not only just normalizes that this can happen to lots of people, but also um, it highlights that not everybody is trained in their programs. When we expect our sometimes professionals to know everything, and we forget that they go through systems of training, and that may not be preparing them for every single eventuality, but more and more physicians and OBs are getting training in perinatal mental health. And the work that Dr. Toya is doing is so important in helping further this conversation within the OB circles and across really all disciplines that care for perinatal folks. So I'm very excited to welcome Dr. Toya. Welcome, Dr. Toya. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I am so glad to be here.
I'm very grateful that you've come on to share both your personal experience and professional experience and where those both are meeting up in your work. I'm sure you're not the only one
Right.
who's dealt with this, but I think from what I understand, there's probably a lot of pressure, or to say the least, to just kind of keep on keeping on and not talk about
Yeah.
this stuff. So I think you doing this gives permission to people to be real about what's happening.
Yeah. And
Um,
that's really part of my goal for sharing my story
mm,
and for talking about this so much is so that people can they can know that they're not alone.
right, right,
Yeah.
absolutely. So yeah, feel free to start wherever your story starts.
Yeah. So this story starts with when I got pregnant with my second. So I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. And I was working at this point, I had already burnt out of my professional career
Mm-hmm.
and left an employed position as an OBGYN and was doing locums, and that's travel doctoring. So it was great because I had my own schedule. I controlled where I worked and when. And I thought because of that level of control that it was going to be great.
Mm-hmm.
I would be able to take the amount of time off that I wanted after the baby. This time around, I would have my mom here during the postpartum period, which I did not the first time because my first child was a COVID baby.
Mm-hmm.
So, right before my baby shower was shut down.
Oh my
And so I did
gosh.
not have my baby shower.
Yeah, bummer.
Yeah. And my mom was not able to come for my first. So, everything was going to be great this time. And the pregnancy itself was more difficult than I expected. It was a lot more pain, and I actually had to stop working earlier because of that pain. And it was one of those things where, as an OBGYN, patients would tell me about the pain that I was having,
Mm,
and I didn't get it. Like, there's no way to understand until you go through it yourself.
sure.
So I was like, oh, this is what they were talking about. Right. So that was a bit of a surprise. And the birth was uncomplicated, fast, but uncomplicated. But afterwards, I was in even more pain than before, which was very surprising because my daughter was so big. There were just changes that happened with delivery and all of the hormone shifts that caused me to just be in constant pain. My tailbone, every time I stepped, I would have hip pain.
Oh no.
And it was just very difficult to lay down. It was difficult to stand up. It was difficult to be in any position for too long. And I was also breastfeeding.
Mm,
And that in and of itself was painful.
mhm,
I wish it was painful with my first two, but this time it was even more painful because my anatomy had changed.
mhm,
Everything was bigger after the
mhm,
second,
mhm,
and my daughter's little mouth was not.
mhm,
So there was a bit of a mismatch there for a while that made it really quite excruciating. And I actually questioned if I could make it because with my son, I breastfed for 22 months
mhm,
and I wasn't planning to go that long
mhm.
with my second, but I wanted to at least get to a year. And within a couple weeks, I was like, I don't know if I can do this. It was that difficult.
Wow.
So there was a physical pain going on. And then my family, even though they mean well and they loved me, they were just not supporting me in the way that I felt like I should have been supported. It
Mhm,
just seemed like everyone was focused on their own story in this time
mhm,
and what they had going on. So, even my mom a little bit, it just seemed like, well, I was able to do this. She told me